Hey, good morning, and good morning to you guys in the audience, by the way. Yeah, there's an audience. Oh my God! Woo! So anyway, good morning and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of October. Our book is the fantastic The Good Asian, which is a great book. Boy, is this a good book! And we're here, as you just got from the thing, with a live studio audience for the first time in a year and a half or more. Oh my God, it's been so long. I can't even remember what the last show was. Do you guys remember what the last show was? No? Might have been Andy Warner for Spring Rain. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, we have a small audience and we have a guest too. We have two guests. This is PORNSAK Pichetshote.
You got it.
I got it.
Totally
Ooh, yeah. All right. And then joining us from France is Alexandre TEFENKGI. Did I get that right?
TEFENKGI.
TEFENKGI. Oh, I apologize, man. I apologize. Fine. I'm going to call you Alex, though, and I'm going to call him PORNSAK, and it's all going to be fine. We're not going to worry about the last names. Hi, gentlemen. Hi to you both.
Hey.
I'm really glad to have you here. Let's start off. My first question is always the same question, and I like this question because it kind of gets to the root of what this is all about. So, of all the things that you can be doing, you have decided to have a career, at least partially in comics. You were an editor at Vertigo, in fact, responsible for making helping make some of our best books. So why comics?
For me, why comics is, it's funny. So as everyone who works in comics knows, it's not a medium and a form with a ton of money. So everyone who is in it does it for pure love. And so it's not a shock that the people are lovely. I love the people working in comics. I love working on comics. As a result, it's embarrassing how much I have to remind myself that when all the other crap in the world drives me crazy, working on comics gives me just pure joy and sort of pure pleasure.
Yeah.
And so, and I feel like every year or two, I'm like reminded by oh, this is just fun. This is lovely. I work with I don't have a lick of musical talent, so I have to assume this is the closest I will get to being in a band. And so playing, with your friends, having them work off you, working off them, it's so nice. And in the way I think when you're making books like ours, the thing I also kind of love about it is you're working with your friends, but you also make new friends.
Yeah.
And so Alex is a new friend, and we talk every 2 or 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
And Will Dennis, my editor, is one of my best friends in comics. Lee Lowridge, our colorist, he's the first professional I got drinks with. Jeff Powell, we've done 2 books together now. I've hung out in New Orleans with him and his wife. Yeah. So it's very much like a family affair. Yeah. And so the idea of being able to do that with your friends, and then the added bonus that strangers like what you do,
right,
and talk to you and invite you out to places like this. It's just fantastic. Yeah. And I think it's funny how often I have to remind myself that the farther away I get from sort of doing comics, the more unhappy and frustrating the world becomes. And so I hopefully will always, comics is the girl who brought me to the dance. And so I think I will always be doing stuff. But even if that wasn't the case, there's just so much lovely people and so much love that sort of surrounds making comics that I don't think I'll ever get too far away from it.
Right. I love that answer. I love everything about that answer. Alex, I'm going to ask you the same exact question, if you would be so kind. Why comics?
Yeah. For me, I always love to tell stories, and I love to sing and draw, but I wasn't much of a great singer. So I decided to pursue in drawings and telling my stories in drawings. And also I don't really like the front lights. So I really love doing my work behind the scene, telling stories and having an indirect communication with the audience.
Yeah, I like that. When did you know that you first wanted to do comics? Did we lose him? Okay. All right. Well, switch off back the shot. There you go. Yeah. Live technology. Woo!
We'll get back to you, Alex.
Yeah. It'll work out. Well, then let's ask you more or less that. So when did you decide that you wanted to first work in comics? Did you Did you even know, or did you?
I honestly, I fell ass backwards into comics. Like for the longest time, I started off as a prose fiction short story writer and then transitioned over to work in film and working on film crew sets. And comics was like the one thing I left myself for enjoyment, for fun. It was like my pure fun thing. And so like going every Wednesday to the comic shop and all that. And then a friend of mine, I had this year where I was just like, I'm not going to work any day jobs. I'm just going to freelance. And and we'll see, and go without a net, and we'll see what like that leads to, and and freelance write and work on films and all that. And about a couple weeks into that, maybe a month into that, a friend of mine like emailed me and saying, so hey, the editor-in-chief of Vertigo is looking for an assistant editor. I don't know what any of those words mean, but I feel like you would. So it sounds like something you might be into. And I was like, that's totally something I would be into, but I wasn't looking for a full-time job. But I'm such a huge fan of Karen's that I was like, you know what, I just want to meet her. I just want to be able to go in and say, I met Karen Berger, this person who put together all these books I love, worked with all the writers that I admire and who's influenced me. So I went into that job interview, and that job interview led to an editing test, which led into a second interview, which led her to making the offer. And the irony was I was still kind of like, I don't know. I told myself I didn't want to work a full-time job. I was going to like, just like see what happens if I just freelance. But I was like, you know what? I've worked like 3-month temp jobs to get by and 6-month temp jobs to get by. If I look at this as like a year temp job, I do that, go back to film, but then I'll have learned so much for being on the other side of the desk, and who knows, and it seems like an opportunity of a lifetime. And so that's what I did. And 1 year ended up being 10 years on 2 different coasts. And like I said, comics has always treated me very well, and I love the people who work on it so much. And I think it is very much because it's such a medium sort of powered by passion and love. And so and I've kind of been here ever since.
Yeah, I love that. Do we get Alex back? Is that, I heard the click? Okay. Hey, Alex, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So the question I was going to follow up with you is when did you know that you first started wanting to draw comics?
I think around 10 years old.
Wow.
I started drawing and copying all the comic books I had in my house, but I had to do that discreetly and kind of on my own time and in my room, because my parents didn't want me to draw it. They thought it was a waste of time.
Yeah, that's funny. What are the comics that like really stand out in your mind as the first comics that you read that like turned you on?
The first comics, because I read American comics but translated in French. So, but the first comics in original version was Steampunk by Christopher Bacalo, and it was a punch in the gut. And I thought, wow, that's awesome. That's incredible. I want to do that even more. Yes.
Did you go to school for drawing comics?
I went to school for drawing comics in Belgium, but after that I took a detour because, as I told you, my parents didn't want me to draw. So I had another scholar life before, and then when I was mature enough and confident enough to say, just I'll do my own stuff, I went to a comic school.
Interesting. How many years was that between when your parents said you can't and then you said, no, I'm going to do it?
Well, it was pretty late. I was 24.
Wow. That's a good long time. Yeah. What are the schools like in Belgium for drawing comics? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming that they're taking it very seriously.
Yeah. There's a entry test to the school I went. So there's about 100 person taking the test, and there's 20 people, 20 students class. That's the first, and then it's a 3 years courses. But it's mostly focused on graphic novels, not mainstream comic books. So it's not really the same as what I'm doing today. Yeah,
I tried to wiki both of you. Neither of you surprisingly have good wiki presences. So I saw. I'm going to stick with Alex just for a minute longer here because it's the back and forth. I saw that you very early got after your school. You got a gig at Spiro, which is pretty cool. And I hear the baby. Hello, baby. Hello, baby.
Yeah, it's dinner time.
Yeah. I hope you're not the one feeding. And then I saw that you had a number of graphic novels come out from a publisher there in Europe.
Yeah. I almost I think it's around 10 years. I worked for the same publisher for about 10 years, and then I wanted to do something different, and with the stories and the narration, something that I didn't do before. So I took my luck in the US, and it worked, and I'm really happy now. So yeah, I think it fits me better now.
Yeah. What do you perceive as the differences between doing graphic novels and doing serialized periodical comics?
It's the way you storyboard each page, and the format of the whole book. Because in Europe you have an average of 8 to 10 panels per page. What is the main focus, of course, is the characters, but also the backgrounds are very important. You cannot draw the same monthly amount of pages than in the US, but and the books are like 42 pages a book, and here it's 22, but it's a monthly issue. In Europe,
Yeah.
it takes you like a year and a half or a year to make one book. So it's not the same.
Yeah. Do you prefer the sort of that monthly deadline, the regular process to the longer process for doing a graphic novel?
It depends. When you have 10 panels per page and 6 or 7 panels per page, you don't tell the story the same way. So here in comics, I use more close-ups. I use in graphic novels. In graphic novels, it's more of a full shot, or sometimes more of a wide shot. Here, it's not the same amount, so that's why it's not the same narrative dynamic.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm gonna jump back to PORNSAK for a minute or three here. Just this is the trick with doing two people interviews, right?
Yeah, totally.
So you fell into kind of a dream job.
Yeah.
Particularly because it's Vertigo and you're working with just amazing people.
My first credit was on The Filth with Grant Morrison, who's like one of my writing idols.
Yeah.
The first phone call I had to make was to Harlan Ellison, telling him where his comic books were.
Oh, nice.
Because Karen Berg would send all her comps over to Harlan.
Right.
So like it was crazy. Like just from jump, it was like crazy.
Did you get nice Harlan or did you get angry?
I was giving him comic books, so I got nice Harlan.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice Harlan. Yeah.
Nice Harlan is great.
Yeah.
What a wonderful person, but angry.
Yeah.
Harlan, like, where's my comic books?
Right. Although the thing about Harlan too was that, like, because you would think like he's getting like a box of comps like every week, really, because that's what we had. Yeah. And that's when I knew like how big a comic book collector he was, because like every 6 months or so he would call and be like, all right, so this is what I'm missing.
Right.
And, and it was like, oh, okay, Powerpuff Girls number 16. Okay, like he was just so on top of everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, as a result, I don't have any scary stories about Harlan, thank God.
Yeah. And having to call Grant as your first call, that must have been.
Yeah. I mean, what's so funny is so there was a time, so right when I think the Filth 13, because it was 13 issues, it sort of came out. Grant was that was at the time right when Grant was finishing New X-Men and coming over to do stuff for DC, and there was like this contentious like contractual thing. I don't still know exactly know because I was too low on the food chain, but there was some sort of contention sort of happening, just getting that deal done and all that kind of stuff. And while that was happening, he was sending in the script, to the last script to the Filth, and I remember, you know, it would eventually sort of settle itself out, but there was this contentious sort of back and forth, and we kept asking him for the script, and we didn't get the script for the Filth 13, and during this contentious back and forth, it was kind of like, I don't know why, like I'm sorry, this is all like blah 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 blah. What is happening? I'm glad this is all happening now. I don't know what's going on with the damn Phil script. I've sent it to you. I've sent it to you and Pornsak like 5 times now, and da 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 da. And the only thing I could remember is like, oh my God, Grant like typed my name out on an email. And as it would turn out, that 13 issues of the Filth, like, one issue is called like Pornmancer or something like that. Like there's some dirty stuff in the Filth. But issue 13 was the first issue to get caught in our spam filters for like 4 different times. And what ended up happening was every time Grant, because like Grant would never mention the script in any of his correspondence emails, and that would just like, because of all this other stuff that was happening, would like piss everybody off. And the reason why is every time he was reminded, he would just send the script out. And every time he would send the script out, it would get caught in our spam filters. And so after we had this big, like, you know, this big contentious sort of thing, they finally checked the spam filters, and there were like 5 emails from Grant, all with just the script of Filth number 13.
Wow, that's crazy. That actually really shocks me that Grant Morrison isn't whitelisted. Right? You know, just as an automatic, like anything that Grant Morrison, you know,
you would think
it doesn't matter what it is, it comes.
Yeah, you would him and Garth. You would just think they just it always sort of passes through. But yeah.
Wow, that's really funny. That's a really funny story. So let's jump to the book.
Sure.
And you know, we can talk about old stuff all the time. Maybe we'll get back to it too. But where did it come from?
So the main thing for me was that, so my dad, I'm Chinese on my dad's side, and my dad and my mom, whenever they were in Thailand, they would argue about politics. And my dad would lose. My dad would always end the argument being like, that's a problem with you Thai people. And then my mom would be like, you're Thai. Like, why are you giving me this crap? Like, and my dad's like, I'm Chinese. And my mom's like, yeah, don't speak Chinese. You've never been to China. Like, don't give me this Chinese crap. And so in my dad's like later years, like he became increasingly obsessed with his Chinese roots. So whenever I would come home, he'd be watching a documentary about a Chinese dam. He would always be saying China is the future and all that kind of stuff. And it would just annoy the house like entirely with the whole thing. And so when he passed away, like part of me was sort of like dealing with and processing that loss was, you know, trying to like learn more about the stuff that he was interested in, China being one of them. And the thing that I find very funny is that like you would think that me learning more about China would have led me to like Chinese mythology or Chinese history, but probably because I'm so interested in sort of like Americana, it led me to Chinese American history, and it led me to discover the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Immigration Act of 1924. And I was really embarrassed. I didn't know any of it. I so didn't know any of it. I did a ton of research just to verify that I got the facts right, because it seemed so crazy to me. And then because I have this like Americana obsessed, you know, pop culture obsessed brain, you know, the first thing that came to mind was just like, wow, in the 1930s, you had Charlie Chan, we had Mr. Moto, we had Mr. Wong Detective. We had all these like Asian crime solvers that were very hot and very hip during a time where America wouldn't let like Chinese people into the country. So then it was like, wouldn't it be interesting to like take that archetype and take that character and just run it through sort of the lens, the racial lens that was actually happening at the time. And that, you know, started that. And then after that was just like a ton of research to actually, and then it's funny because I think at one point I had a manager or something like that and say, don't talk about it in public. Like people steal the idea. And it's like, let them, like if someone else wants to do this research and write this, oh my God, save me from myself. But no, it was just a ton of research to put the book together. And then eventually it was, you know, asking Will if he wanted to do it. And we found Alex and, you know, we brought the team together.
So let's talk about that part of the process, the putting it together. Did you put together a formal pitch?
So what I did, yes, I did. What I do for all my books is, and aspiring comic book creators, if this helps you, I put together a 1 to 2 page pitch of all my books, just so I know what it is. And so one of the big parts of my process is I'll figure out the story, and as I'm figuring out the story, I'm also figuring out that like 2-line log line, just so that I know how to pitch it quickly, but also that I know that like, what's the punchiest version of the story?
Yeah.
And so I do that kind of simultaneously, and I do sort of these pitch documents that you know, I truncate the story to about you know, with less than 2 pages, and then kind of do that all in there. And then so once I have that, and once I know I have that, that's when my first call was to Will Dennis, my editor, who's also like one of my oldest friends. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, and I have a weird schedule because like I write on television on the side, so I kind of have to squeeze comic book projects anytime I'm not like writing television. So I kind of told Will, that's like, listen, this is this book I want to do. You know, do you want to do it with me? Because you're the first person. I mean, because if you don't know who Will Dennis is, Will edits all the best Image books, but also he's edited some of the best crime comics. 100 Bullets and Scalped are 2 of my personal favorites. And he ran like a crime line of graphic novels over at Vertigo. So there was no one who would be better at this than Will. And plus, he's like one of my oldest friends. And so I was just like, do you want to do this with me? Because I don't know who else I could do this with besides you. But also, too, I don't know when I'll be able to start because I think at the time I was still working on a television show, and I was just kind of told me the way I work is that like once I write a first script, that's when I'll feel comfortable going out to an artist. Because the thing I'm terrified of doing, and I think all comic book writers at least should be terrified of doing this, is like leaving an artist waiting for scripts. Sure. So my process is I have to write a first script, and then we start going out to an artist.
Interesting.
And all that. And usually I have an idea of like the kind of art I have in mind. And then once an artist gets on board, then I'll kind of like do a rewrite of the script to kind of like shape it a little bit more to how like they tell a story or to what their stylistic, you know, preferences are.
Yeah.
And that was how it started.
And you didn't have a publisher lined up, I'm assuming, at that point?
No. I mean, I think, and this might have been slightly arrogant, like Infidel had done so well, and with Will there, we were kind of assuming that Image would go for it. And if it didn't, we'd go down the line to the other publishers. But, and you know, and so for us was, and again, it's kind of the way I like to work, we put the whole team together ourselves. And so once, and actually, maybe at that point, we didn't have Lee and Jeff on board. I'm not sure. Like maybe we just had Alex. And so once I had that 2-page pitch, Alex did a couple development sketches. We sent it to, you know, and then we sent it to Eric, and Eric was great, like very quickly. Eric was just kind of like, I think that was the other thing too, like working with Will, you know, because he works with like the Scott Snyders and the Jeff Lemire's and all that sort of stuff of the world. Like when Will CC'd on an email, like you get a response like that.
Right, sure.
And so, and Eric's response was like, yes, please. And then we were kind of like off to the races from there. So it was a much easier process than pitching my first book.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Alex, will you talk to me maybe about getting your involvement on this book?
Yeah, so I was living in Vietnam, and then, as I like to do every year, not now because there's the pandemic, I like to go to the New York Comic Con. And when I'm there, I like to meet my friends. And I met my friend Cliff Chang, and I told him about my personal story, that I found out that I had Vietnamese roots late in my life, like 2 years prior. And then I went to Vietnam to discover this part of my identity and to live. Not for all my life, but for a while there, and I was in the process to discovering this part of myself, and we went on the project and what I wanted to do in the future, and he told me that he might have something for me that would fit my skills, and he introduced me to PORNSAK and Will.
Interesting. Let me back up there just a little bit. I'm fascinated that you learned that you had this Vietnamese background. How did you find that out?
I found out that's my mother called me and said, you know, your father is not your biological father, and you have your biological father is part Vietnamese. And I was in Belgium at the time, and she was in France. So I told her, you know, that's a great way to tell me that kind of news. Maybe you should have waited for me to come. So I waited to.
Wow.
I returned
And
to France, and we had a discussion, and yes,
yeah, and so this was
we had a
well into your
discussion.
20s, yeah?
Oh, I was 33.
Oh, 33. Wow. Wow. What an age to learn that everything you thought wasn't true. Wow, that's really amazing to me, actually. And so when you went to Vietnam to live, like what was your experience like?
It was an experience. How it's complicated. It's like in the book. It's not. Nothing is easy. It's like on one part I was related to this country, and on the part I was a complete stranger, because also I'm a mixed race. So I'm part African, I'm part Vietnamese, part French. So it's you don't belong anywhere, and you belong everywhere. That's complicated. So I was kind of an actor of my life in Vietnam, but also like a spectator to see what Vietnam would bring to me and what I could bring to Vietnam. And it's still in process, so I haven't really digested all the repercussions that would come out of this experience. And I had to go back to France because of the pandemic. Otherwise, I would still be in Vietnam. So it's an unfinished business, an unfinished story.
Wow. Wow. That's that. I find this interesting. I find that very fascinating, man. And I hope everything works out really sweetly for you. When you were introduced to PORNSAK, what was the context like? Either you can answer that too.
So on my end, it was funny because Alex would sort of tell me his. Well, actually, I should say that while we were looking for an artist, you know, it was really important to me to find an artist of Asian descent because, you know, I did not want to micromanage like the small details, sure. And there were just like little things that I just knew an Asian artist would kind of bring from their personal life into
Sure.
it. And I was actually shocked to find like every Asian artist I could think of that whose work I like was like swooped up,
Yeah.
like, and was working on something. So it was actually a pretty long process sort of finding an artist. And so, you know, I went to Cliff. Me and Will kind of went to Cliff at some point, if you knew of anybody. And there's a part of me that was just kind of like, man, Cliff, or Will was just like, maybe Cliff will do it. I'm like, Cliff is working on Catwoman. Like, he's got way better things to do than work with us. But he, but you know, Cliff, because Cliff started off as an editor, so he's got an editorial brain, and so we also knew that like if anyone could find someone for us, it would be Cliff. Mm-hmm. And that was be exactly sort of what happened, like when he would bump into Alex at this party. And the thing that I find amazing about it is just, and me and Alex talk about it a lot, like this book has been like charmed with such like wonderful timing on so many levels. And like during this time where we were looking for an artist, like, you know, Alex comes in, like meets Cliff at a party, tells him this story. It's basically like, I just found out I'm Asian. I'm trying to figure out what that means. Yeah. And Cliff is just like, oh my God, do I have the book for you?
Right.
And you know, and he had just and it was also like he had just finished Outpost Zero, his book for Skybound. Yeah. So it was just kind of, and then like when Alex, you know, when we saw Alex's work, we were just like, oh my God, we have to lock him up as quickly as humanly possible. Yeah. You know, so yeah, it was just like this wonderful like pieces of timing all around.
Yeah. And Alex, when you got that 2-page synopsis, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what we said, Alex. I think that I don't totally remember. I think that's what we said, Alex.
Yeah. So Alex, what was your reaction to that to that synopsis?
As I told to PORNSAK, the stars aligned, because when I read this synopsis, I thought, wow, that I haven't worked on a noir yet, but the content, the story is really something that is interesting to me and echoing what I'm going through at the moment. So I thought it was I don't believe in fate, but it was a really great alignment.
Yeah, that's cool. What once you received those 2 pages, Did you immediately commit to it? Did you start drawing? Like, what was your sort of your process there?
Yeah, the process is first to get a feel of the characters, so the character designs first, and how Hark would look like, how shape you would have, what kind of behavior. So I would design him accordingly, and yeah, we went back and forth with PORNSAK, and it was not really hard. It came along really nicely.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, designing the characters and it's the starting point, and then I can have a visual for how they move, they behave, they act. And then I go to watch videos about the noir genre, how the detective walks, talks, because it's not the same acting as you cannot. I could. As hard now because and the masculine figure and the masculine behavior and how to way to act is different than now. So yeah, I had to really sink into all the movies and what reference I could put my hands on.
Yeah, there's I mean, your previous book was Outpost Zero, which is science fiction, and there's a huge difference between doing science fiction and doing noir. Was that a difficult jump for you to make?
I would say that Outpost Zero, we designed everything, like the whole universe, how they're dressed, where they live in, the planet, everything. So it was easier because you can make everything up. Here you have to be historically accurate, and the way they dress, the way the cars, everything. So of course it takes longer now than for Outpost Zero.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've asked artists this recently, that the whole way that one researches is completely different today than it used to be, say, 10 years ago. You know, you now have the internet, and you can look up primary sources of what things look like in the 30s. Whereas back in the old days, people used to have folders filled with clippings, that maybe I'll use this someday, were there any particular challenges for you doing the visual research, Alex, particularly around Chinatown and things like that in San Francisco?
It was not difficult because the groundwork was done by PORNSAK. When I get an issue, I have a folder with references of Chinatown and how the people dress, the fashion at the time, and I add my own research on top of that. But the groundwork is already made by PORNSAK, and I'm really lucky for that.
Yeah, that fascinates me, PORNSAK. You put together.
Yeah, I do. It's funny because I ended up doing it now. It's become such a it's such a habit that not only do I do it for this book, but like if I'm doing a short story, there'll be like an appendix where I'll keep like photos of like, this is what I'm thinking, this, and I think I just sort of need it in my head to kind of see what everything sort of is and to really visualize it. And I also think too, like, this is one of those projects where an artist can kind of get like buried in research.
Sure.
So part of it for me is that, like, there is the most sort of like time, there's the biggest time commitment comes in their part of the job. So whatever I can do on my side.
Right. Like, I've already done this research.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah. And then what Alex always does, he always does his own research on top of that. But for me, it's just a way to kind of give him sort of a head start.
Yeah.
But really, it's like I kind of do it now on everything thing I work on, where it's just like, oh, he has this particular type of gun, and like, oh, here's a picture of that gun and all that stuff. And I feel like I've gotten it. I think Jeff Johns writes his scripts that way too, where he drops a lot of pictures kind of into his sort of scripts. So yeah, it's something I've just picked up along the way.
Interesting.
Just, like, lots of research.
I think that's the first time I've heard that
really?
250 interviews.
Wow.
I think that's the first time we heard that. Yeah.
Wow.
I like that. Let me pause here just really briefly and go. Do you guys have a question you'd like to ask? We can take some audience questions anytime. I can run this whole thing. Is there? Oh, Jordan's got a question from the internet. Okay, give me the question from the internet. Let's do that while you guys ponder what you want to do. Fabio Moon.
Oh.
PORNSAK, after you left your editing job and focused on writing, have you ever freelanced as an editor again?
I have. First of all, it's a question from Fabio Moon, so that's kind of awesome. Can we just sort of say that, coming in from San Paulo? I hope he's in San Paulo, or maybe he's off in a convention anywhere. So hello, Fabio, and thank you for like listening.
And good to see you again, buddy.
Yeah. Also, you should be drawing something right now, I'm sure. No, but I haven't. I came very, very, very dangerously close to editing a graphic novel for some friends, but that project didn't work out, and I kind of breathed a sigh of relief. There's like 2 or 3 people out there that like that I've never told them, I've never told anyone, but that's like I promised myself I will edit something for them at some point. I love editing. I miss editing considerably. The problem or the challenge with editing is that it's such a reactive sort of thing that it's hard to balance. And I've talked about this, Stuart Moore, who's also both a fantastic editor and a fantastic writer. It's hard to balance a writing schedule with editing, because if I'm like pounding my head on a script trying to figure it out, and an email comes in, I will always run to that email like, oh my God, something to do that isn't like working on the script.
Sure.
So as a result, it completely sort of disrupts my writing flow. Now, there was a time where I thought like, ooh, maybe I can do a thing where if it was a graphic novel, I say my editing office hours are from like 9 a.m. to noon, and anything that doesn't happen in there, I won't do. But I don't actually know if I have that kind of self-control. And again, like that's what I sell myself to do. But I was relieved a little bit when that project fell apart, so I wouldn't have to like test that theory. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, I've been busy with work since then, so like I haven't like had the nerve to like throw myself into that. But there's been a couple projects where I have committed myself to editor, and then they've thankfully like fallen apart, and I've been like, oh, thank God, because I don't know how I would actually pull that off. And but I love editing. I would love to. I mean, Fabio and Gabriel don't need an editor anymore because they're just like rock stars now. But I would love to edit like again. I don't know how I would make it work.
But everybody needs editors. I mean, that's the thing, and it's when I was saying earlier that it was hard to find things about you on the internet. You have this 10-year career editing, and there's no information about it anywhere.
It's funny. Well, comic book editors are kind of invisible in that sense, and I know a lot of comic book editors who like that. Like Will, my editor, Will Dennis, my editor. He's like, he wouldn't even. I wanted to put his name like on the cover, and he wouldn't let me do that. He's like, no, I'm below the line. Like I don't believe in that. So there's a lot of editors who just don't believe in having that kind of profile.
Right.
But like it's a fact. I would say it's becoming a lost art, except for the fact there has been so many new publishers sort of cropping up.
Right.
Because the thing that I kind of lament about Marvel and DC, and there are people like fanning those flames, but the jobs at Marvel and DC are quickly turning into franchise management.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the nuts and bolts of editing, are getting lost. And even when I was at Vertigo, you had to be very aggressive of like, oh, what does this person do? Okay, I want to learn that. Like no one, part of like, there's not enough money in comics, so everyone's running at 800 miles an hour.
Right.
And so if you want to learn, you have to run alongside them and be like, okay, let me pick up whatever I can. You can't just wait for someone to sort of teach you.
Yeah.
And part of the thing that I would say I lament a little bit, at least in the big countries, the big companies, is that there's less people around who are purebred, like the number, it's startling and it's sad, the number of people I think working at Marvel and DC who don't know who like Maggie and Hopi are and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, but there are editors that do, and they take very seriously training and all that. But I've talked to them, and they're disappointed in themselves that they can't train the degree they want to, partly because partly because of the time and how many meetings they're put in, but also partly because like now the job is half virtual.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, so it's like something that's really fascinating. I won't mention his name, I don't think he'll mind, but I won't mention his name just in case. But a fascinating conversation I had with an editor was just like, I'm working with an assistant editor now because the job is virtual. He's living in like I actually don't remember what state he's living in, but you know what? He has a house because he can afford a house on our salary in this little state that he's in like Nebraska or Montana and all that sort of stuff. He doesn't have to live like we did with like 5 roommates and like wait 7 years before being able to afford his own place. And that's kind of a game changer. And that opens the job up to so many more people. But on the other hand, he can't be in the office for me to like give him little tips here and there and all that kind of stuff. And so it's this new paradigm shift that I'm trying to get used to, where it's just like, on the one hand, the jobs open up to way more people, but on the other hand, we can't teach them to the intimate degree that we used to be able to.
Yeah. I also find that a lot of editors now are editing graphic novels rather than sort of not the grind of comics, but that it's a very different kind of production, right? And it strikes me that a lot of the people who are editing graphic novels, there are many who are good, but they have a prose background rather than a comics background, and they're trying to structure things like prose stories rather than like comic stories, and those two things are not the same.
No, absolutely. And that's why, but again, at the same time though, like it's been great watching stuff like, you know, watching what a powerhouse boom has become, you know, like I'm very, very curious and very, very excited to see what Mark Doyle does at IDW and, you know, and you know, what the guys out on for Vault are doing and in Scout and all that sort of stuff. And so there are people who, and it's been fascinating to watch, like people coming from the big companies and starting these smaller things where they can, like Mark is going to teach his staff, and that's going to be really exciting to watch. So there are, you know, a lot of those graphic novel publishers, like as you mentioned, like they do come from, and I'm actually very curious. I'm so far away from that side of it. Like I don't know how they run their shop. So I'm curious because I knew like back in the day, like at least when I was at Vertigo, so many prose publishers wanted to get into comics, and they realized like, wow, this is really expensive. Like, and a lot of them like pulled back very quickly, and now they've kind of geared up to sort of to do that. So it's been interesting to watch, but I'm really excited about like all these like upstart publishers, whether it's like TKO or Bad Idea and all that kind of stuff. They are kind of out there, and it's been fun to watch. Everyone's trying to crack the code in a different way of how to make like original comics in a way that's like equitable but also fair to the creators and like fair to everyone involved. And it's fun watching everyone like try to crack the code and sort of to see who like figures out the secret sauce in order to make it work. Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing that concerns me about let's call them the New York publishers. You know, the traditional prose publishers, because what you were talking about before, where they realize how much money it costs to make comics, and they're trying not to spend that amount of money, as far as I can see. You know, because it's not the investment of a creative team in writing a prose book is very different than the investment of a 200-page graphic novel. You know? And I think that's why a lot of the times you see those publishers and they will hire a cartoonist. They hire someone who knows how to make the full package. And that was the thing, like a lot of young people who don't know how to negotiate a deal for themselves, or that they end up making minimum wage when they calculate it. Exactly. And all that. Like there was a bunch of people who have asked, you know, why do the Good Asian serially? Why not do it as sort of one big honking graphic novel? And there are two answers I have for that. The truly honest answer is I'm just a comic book geek and I love like single issues and like I'm that guy. But the other thing too is that like you'll see like 300-page graphic novels on your shelves, but it's exactly the things that you're talking about. Like it's done by cartoonists doing everything. They get paid, you know? And so like to do a book like, you know, where I'm hiring professionals all the way around, like there's about a century's worth of experience working on the Good Asian. To do that, pay them what they're worth, making sure that they get what they're worth all the way through. Serialized comics is still the only way to do that. It's the only way to do it, yeah. So as a result, you have to build that experience. Like, yes, you could do it other ways, but you're making sacrifices in quality, you know, or you're getting sort of a newcomer and all that kind of stuff. And it's still something that we're kind of learning as an industry. And we're going to be learning it for some time. We could really go down that road a long time, but let me go back to you guys. Seth, you got a question in the back.
Sure. So you've mentioned that when you write a story, one of the first things you do after the log line is write a 2-page synopsis. I'm a journalist. I do outlines for all my stories. It sounds to me like that's an outline of the story, but how much detail are you putting in? Can you talk about what goes in that for you, and maybe, you know, if you know of other writers who are doing comics, what goes in it for them if they do something similar?
I'll be honest, I don't know what it's like for other writers. You know, I you know, usually for other writers, I'll get those documents. So when I was an editor, I would get those documents in. So I don't know what it's like for them sort of live. For me, though, I'm actually writing that 2-page synopsis. I'm doing now for one project. Writing that sort of outline and that 2-page synopsis almost, and that 2-line synopsis almost simultaneously. And for me, it's to break down, the synopsis to me is about the beginning, the middle, the end. So like, you know, I want to know what the beginning, the middle, end of the story is. I want to know what the characters are. And I kind of do it all at the same time. And for me, it's because where I am at my stage in my career, and I don't know how long this will be, and this might just be the part of the way I work, is that I'm not a person that I put my name on a book and everyone immediately runs to sort of buy it. I need something that can cut through the noise, preferably in a tweet about like what my book actually is. So I am figuring out the story I want to tell and how that works, but I'm also thinking about like, what's the punchiest way to communicate that story to someone? And usually, you know, a lot of times, and I've seen this with other writers too, they will have a story that when they frame it in a sort of 2 sentences, it will look very passive. And so for me, the part of the process is, oh, if I find a way to make that 2-line synopsis a little bit more active, well, my story gets a lot more active as well. And so it kind of comes sort of hand in hand, and that sort of tends to be how I work. But for me, it's so that I know when I start the story, I have all the pieces that I need. I have the beginning, the middle, and the end. I have the characters that I need, and for me, it's so that, you know, I've never, actually, it's funny, I'm in the process right now for the first time of putting together a pitch, an original pitch to a new publisher that, and I've never done that before. Usually I've done it for other creative people, so it's just enough to get other creative people on board. Because that's the other thing too, like I want to make sure there's enough information there to get an artist like Alex or an artist like Aaron Campbell excited about the work, you know, because I also know like I'm not paying Marvel and DC rates. So it's trying to get all my, you know, my ducks lined up in a row to get like the best people I have for the job. And I think that's it. It's like, so the best foot forward. Hopefully the comics are, you know, better than those 2 pages, but I want to make sure there's just enough excitement, because at this point in my career, I can't say, I swear to God, it'll get better at a later stage. You know, I need to have that excitement in that sort of 2-page document that I give them.
Yeah. Follow up, Seth?
Sure.
Only if you have one.
When you say that you're not paying Marvel and DC rates, does that mean you're actually paying a fair rate?
I like to think. Well, okay, so here's what I will say. So for a while, I was just like, you know, I feel like I'm paying like 80% of Marvel and DC rate. But what I would find out is when I worked with Aaron, and Aaron had been working for 10 years in comics at that point, you know, and so when I came into this, my strategy was I'm going to pay 80%. What I think like the top rate is if you're not on an exclusive for Marvel and DC, but I'll also get you back end. So you have back end on not just on what the books makes, but any media sales we make, like everything. And I feel like that feels fair. And when I talked to Aaron, who had been working in comics for 10 years, and I won't mention the publisher, although it's very easy to like find out, like it'll take a 10-second Google search to find out who I'm talking about. But like in those 10 years, that rate that I paid him was more than he had made in his entire career. And he was making the top rate. And one of the things I found at that point, which I was kind of shocked to find, was that in the 5 or 6 years I had stepped away from making comics, much like the rest of the country and the world, the middle class in comics had fallen out. And so you have guys making huge amounts of money and guys being paid nothing. And there was very little in the middle. And I was kind of shocked to find that. And so I've learned now that what I pay is a really fair rate, even though I'm constantly self-conscious, because I feel like, I don't work with anyone whose work I don't adore and don't think that they can be superstars. So I always feel like they can be working on like higher profile books that sort of pay better than mine. And I hope and this was the case with Aaron. Like Aaron went to do Hellblazer afterwards. In the best possible scenario, hopefully everyone still wants to work with me, but also that they will, take that level up in their career and work on sort of like bigger projects that get that. I've always said about myself that I am a mediocre writer held up by a really good editor. And so one of the things that really good editor knows how to do is, and I do think it was part of my superpower when I was editing comics, is I can see untapped potential. And so looking at someone like Aaron, I was just like, oh, I know what isn't being done right with his, not wasn't being done right, but you know, he wasn't getting good coloring. And so often there's so many good artists that are just getting killed in the colors. You know, it's unfortunately a thing that happens a lot now in comics, where we'll pay a lot of money for a writer and an artist, and then we'll cheap out on the colorist and the letterer, and not realizing that just brings down the work of everybody involved. And so one of the things that I did with Aaron, and like it was exciting to do it with Alex, is look at their stuff and also realize like, oh, their stuff could be even better if we we turn the dials in these particular directions, and show an audience who's used to seeing their work a new way of looking at their work. So yeah, so that's a little bit of how I work.
I like that. I like that a lot. There was another question right there. Yeah.
It's super interesting, but you know, on this particular book, you know, you had to do, you're like doing a lot. Like you're telling a really good noir story,
Yeah.
you're telling a really good history
Yeah.
story, but it's also one like also very personal.
Yeah.
It has a point
Yeah.
in the time, and it's a point you want to make feel relevant
Yeah.
for today. It would have been easy to become very didactic,
Yeah.
right? Like, so were those myths in your mind? Like how, as you were like coming up with the story, did you make sure it was like balanced and all those?
I mean, there's always a goal to kind of like make sure that it's balanced. There's like, I feel like there's two parts to sort of like what you're saying. And the first part is, and I learned this when I was writing my first graphic novel, Infidel, about like how to tell political stories and not make it didactic. And this was something that I borrowed from something like Mike Carey had told me once about Mike Carey. When I edited Mike Carey in a book called The Unwritten, I also edited him on a book called Crossing Midnight for Vertigo. So I worked with him a lot. And he has this big thing about where you set your tent where you set your story tent. And he's just like, it's and I'm paraphrasing him, but it's kind of like what they sort of say, like, you know, directing, acting, like 80% of the work is casting. You know, 80% of the work in telling stories like these, I find, is where you pitch your story tent. If you pitch your tent in political soil, the stories will be political. And because of that, and I look at something like The West Wing, right? The West Wing takes place in the White House. Aaron Sorkin can tell stories about like what to do with the turkey on Thanksgiving, but because it takes place in the White House, everything the characters do have a political ramification, and there's a political aspect in sort of what they're doing. So it was sort of taking that lesson of, oh, if you set your story around political topics, you don't actually need to do much more after that to make them political. They're already political. So then it's just telling stories about the people and about the characters, and the politics kind of come through. And that's one of the things I learned in Infidel. And so I try to take that lesson for The Good Asian, of just kind of like, this is political topic matter. Because it's political topic matter, politics are affecting, you know, all the characters every day anyway. I just need to be honest to those characters. I don't need to worry about sort of like making a political statement. The thing I do have to worry about is I occasionally will make a creative choice, and I will constantly take 2 steps back and say, well, all right, on a political level, like what is the book saying? Am I comfortable with everything the narrative is saying? You know, and that's something I need to do on a regular basis. Just, you know, tell the story, take 2 steps back and be like, oh, but what am I saying? Like, am I saying anything that I would regret saying if I put it into words? And then, so that's a little bit of the process that happens there. And then the other aspect of sort of balancing sort of the historical aspect and the genre aspect is, whenever I'm writing a book, you know, very early on, I try to figure out like what are the 3 key like appeals to that sort of book would be, you know, and then I just try to make sure I'm always hitting that. Every issue, you know, needs to hit that. So like, I think for something like The Good Asian is, I want to make sure, you know, there's got to be some cool genre element in there, you know, and sometimes a cool genre element is how we tell the story and sort of the paneling and the structure and all that kind of stuff. But also hopefully it's about like some cool like detective-y kind of trick or something on how the detective mind works. But then there's also, all right, but the other key appeal to the book is sort of the Asian American history aspect of it. So there should be some aspect, or not Asian American history, but Asian American culture. So sometimes it'll be you'll see in the beginning of the book, you know, it'll be about history, but as you get on later in the book, I'm trying to get into more sort of like cultural stuff and more identity stuff that I think is particular to the Asian American experience. And then the third aspect to the book is usually sort of an emotional aspect that has to deal with it. And for this particular book, it is about sort of acceptance and belonging and all that kind of stuff. So whenever I work on the book, I try to make it clear. Like, I have them like posted like on my wall about just like you know, the why I think people are showing up, and why when the things I think I'm hitting where this book is really working. And it's kind of my checklist when I'm done with an issue. It's like, did I hit that? Can I hit it harder? And then, so that's how I balance the genre and sort of the more historical sort of aspects of it.
Let me follow up with one thing there. I'm curious as to sort of your timing on production of this relative to the story, relative to what was happening in America. And the pandemic and the Asian violence.
So I work really, really far in advance. So for an idea of how far in advance I work, I handed in the first draft of issue 8 around when the book launched.
Okay.
So I worked really far in advance. So a lot of the stuff that the book was about, like when I pitched the book, I thought the relevant aspect of the book was going to be growing up in the shadow of an immigration ban. You know, because that was on my mind. The Muslim ban was on my mind. And to me, the hook of the book was it's kind of speculative fiction set in the past. Like, if this Muslim ban keeps going for 30, 40 years, what's it going to be like for a generation to come of age underneath that? And let's look to history to see what it's like. And I thought that was going to be the relevant portion. I had no idea, what would happen, especially here in San Francisco, would have happened. And then it was actually a surreal sort of experience, because we announced the book on, I think, the 3rd week of February. And at the beginning of February, that's the Lunar New Year. And so by the 3rd week of February, there were a lot of reports that old people were getting mugged for the Lunar New Year money, which was on top of the anti-Asian hate crimes that were already happening. So the week we launched was when social media was at a fervor for the national news to cover it, because they weren't covering it. And I think that week, the first national news outlets started covering it. And so it became kind of a thing. And I did not know how to talk about the book. Like, we had just announced it, and there's a couple interviews, and they air at weird times. So you never know which one is the first. But I remember my first interview, I had no idea at all how to talk about it. And I definitely felt myself fumbling through the entire thing. And I went through some interviews thinking I'm being too much of a downer. And then on some interviews being I'm being way too upbeat. And I just had no idea how to talk about any of it. And eventually, one of the things that I love about working on comics, and again, it was something I learned on Infidel, is that, hopefully if you're just staying honest to the facts that you have and the story areas that you're working with, that gets you through 80% of the way. And then from there, you can dial turn that stuff in the lettering pass to talk and to dig deeper into the context of the times, and to talk about that stuff a little deeper. And so that's kind of what I found with the book, is that I still work pretty far in advance. So we lock lettering a good month before the book goes to the printer. But even then, I'm trying as much as possible. And I'm kind of a news junkie with all this sort of stuff. So I'm reading it, sort of everything, and just trying to sort of see what the zeitgeist is like, and have it sort of try to be as up to date as these issues as I can when I'm writing about this stuff, so that I can kind of dial turn the dialogue to if I want to lean into it, or lean back, lean away from it if it's something I don't feel comfortable talking about yet. But that's kind of how I work to try to sort of time all this stuff. But even then, I'm constantly terrified that the world will move in a way where what I'm talking about isn't the right thing to say, or isn't the thing that people want to hear. And the thing, my North Star through all of this, is that to not flinch when I'm telling these stories. And one of the things I find is, when you flinch, when you try to editorialize yourself to say something that you think is more sensitive, you think is more correct, you think and all that sort of stuff, history kind of proves you wrong. And so, and that's what I try to do, is just try as much as I can to be comfortable with everything I'm saying, but also not to flinch. And Infidel was a book where it was 5 issues, and every issue I made a creative choice that made me very stressed out when the book kind of came out. And the book did well. And so I try to learn from that lesson in everything I do, to hopefully make a choice that makes me uncomfortable, because that worked out well. And I'll probably keep doing that until it works out badly. But that's kind of my process and how I make this stuff.
Yeah. I want to ask Alex sort of the same question. Are there things that changed in the way that you told the story, or images that you chose to use or not use because of things that were happening in contemporary news? Or were you limiting yourself to the noir aspect of it? You're muted. Alex, you're muted.
He's on a little bit of delay. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Try again.
No. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I wasn't really affected on the story and on with my drawings by the news, but on the personal side, we talked about that with PORNSAK and how it would maybe align with what we were saying in the book. Again, the timing was the timing was I don't know what to say, but it was aligned, and for me, I didn't want to react to what was currently happening, because maybe it would have been digested, not enough digested, and it would have been clumsy to put something inside and use images that would relate to what happened. So I just talked with PORNSAK about the coincidence, and we kept it at that, even though we were touched by the news. Yes.
Yeah, I understand. PORNSAK was talking about how he works so far ahead. How far ahead of the scripts are you? He said that he was writing. He had turned in number 8.
The first draft, yeah.
The first draft, number 8, when the first issue came out. Where were you in the drawing process at that point, Alex?
I'm on number 8.
Oh, you were drawing number 8 at the same time?
Now I'm currently on number 8.
Oh, you're currently on number 8. So
yes.
So you're about two issues ahead then, roughly.
Yes, there's two issues left.
Yeah. Have you kept the same speed, or have you gotten a little further behind?
The speed with the pandemic, that was a bit shaky at one point, but on the long run, everything sets correctly, and we are not behind. I think on schedule, we are on schedule, so there's no problem.
Very good, very good.
The really impressive thing about Alex during all this is that he had a newborn son during the course of all this, and so the fact that he manages to do I think his new son was born like the same week the book dropped.
Wow.
So yeah, so the fact that he's been drawing the book, doing press, raising the kids, like, it blows my mind.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit of a difficult year because we had to leave Vietnam fast, and we left all our belongings there, and we couldn't go back. So our landlords, they have all our stuff in a house. And we waiting to go back to get our furnitures and everything from Vietnam, because we left in a hurry with the pandemic. Yes.
Wow. And your son, was he born in Vietnam or born in France?
No, he's born in France. He was conceived in France and born in France.
Very good. Okay. Just, it's a big world. Everybody's changing.
Yeah, it's a baby pandemic.
that is true. That is true. Do we have any other questions from the audience? No, you guys are all good. Okay. I just want to check. I want to make sure. I can talk forever. So, actually, Alex, I'm going to stick with you. Let's stick with you for another minute or 3. What's your mechanical process when you get a script? How do you start breaking down the script? Do you do thumbnails? Are you just start drawing? What's your particular process?
When I receive a script, first I read it until the end, and then I wait like a day, and then I come back to it and I storyboard the whole issue, and then I wait a day, and the day after I'll go back to the storyboard to see if everything I did was good, and if I'm happy with it, and then I send it to PORNSAK and Will. They have a look at it. They give me feedback on the storyboard. What could be improved? What could we change on the narration? How to make everything smooth. And then once I have the green light, I draw the issue and send it back. And then there's another round of feedback, and then I make the modifications, and I send the final pass to them in high resolution.
Yeah, to a certain extent, you've almost got two editors on the book.
For better or worse.
For better or for worse. Do you enjoy that as a creative person doing the storytelling, to have that number of voices in, or are you like, I wish they just let me draw?
The thing is, I don't see them as my editor. I see them as friends, and friends, they want the better for you. They want you to improve, and they want the best for the book. And as I want the best for the book, so that they never had any problem or anything that was not smooth at on that level.
Yeah, one of the things you said earlier is that you that you did your layouts, and then you put it aside for a day or two to see if you still like it. How often would you say that you end up changing your own work?
Every time.
Every time. Wow. Wow.
Not on all the pages, but yeah, there's many things that I see that could be improved, and that at the moment I thought it would be best to storyboard it like that, but with a night pass, I think differently, and I change because I have I could have a step back, and I think my mind is clearer.
Yeah. And so PORNSAK, when you get these layouts, how often do you think that they need changes, or how often you're like, oh my God, I can't tell him what to do because he's so good?
I mean, he is always sort of so good. So there's always sort of a sequence there that is absolutely amazing. I am a nightmare to work for, so I am always popping in with like, oh well, let's make sure we communicate this, and let me make sure we can communicate that. So I always have every stage of the process. I always have a lot to say with sort of stuff. I like to think that is part of the reason why like the storytelling sort of all click clocks together, with everything sort of so well. But I have a vested interest in liking to think that. So but yeah, no, I have a lot to say about everything, and the rest of the team is very, very wonderful and very good about letting me have my say.
I'm assuming, Alex, that you agree with that his notes are generally useful.
Yeah. I want to highlight this. So far, and with the people I worked in the US, there was only the good of the book in mind, and there was no big ego, and that's why all my collaboration were smooth and great. So I'm really lucky, because when I was in Europe, some of my projects were really difficult, but here I'm just blessed.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And one of the things I do want to say too is that I also think that's one of the reasons why having an editor like Will Dennis is so great, because so often whenever I weigh in, I weigh into Will, and my thing always starts with save me from myself. Like, don't let this do harm. And Will is always great about knowing what to let pass and what to be like, dude, like you got to let this go. Yeah. Like, so he's just so amazing to work with.
Yeah, that's nice. That's the way it should be. Alex, when you do you work physically on paper? Do you work digitally? What's your mechanical process?
It depends on the day. Some days I storyboard on my sketch pad. Another day, another issue, I'm storyboarding on my iPad with Procreate. Yeah, it depends. But I cannot I don't have a habitual process like I'm going to do everything on paper and then on my computer. Sometimes it's on paper and computer. Sometimes it's only on computer. It depends how I feel at the moment.
What about the finished art itself?
Yeah, the finished art itself is done on always done on computer with Clip Studio. So yeah, this never changes.
Okay. Yeah. No, everybody has a different way of doing it. So what do you like about working digitally versus working on paper? Just out of curiosity.
It's really easier to correct and modify the page, because if I had been drawing on paper and I would have to change the posture of a character, it would be a pain. Here I just have to erase the part and redraw on it, and that's quick. So on the modification wise, that's really where I can go faster.
Nice, I love it. I don't know what else do I got to ask here. I love the kineticness of the art. There's a lot of motion. There's a lot of movement in this book that really serves it well. And even when we're looking at small panels, there's still the camera's constantly moving. I very much admire your artwork. I have to say, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, he's so good. He's
so
good.
Yeah.
He's so good. Ridiculous.
Have pages come from you and you were just like, oh my God, how he did this even better?
All the time.
Yeah.
Every issue, every few pages. It's one of the most exciting things about the book is that with this particular, the way we're telling this story too, a lot of it is experiments, and that's part of the fun, when I'm talking to Lee or when I'm talking to Jeff, a lot of the time we're doing stuff like, I don't know if this works and I don't know if I've seen this before, so we're going to give it a shot. And so to watch the pages come back from Alex and be like, oh my God, it works. And not only does it work, he found a way to just do something crazy I never thought in a million years. It's part of the reason why I do stuff like this is to work with guys like Alex who are so good at what they do, or what such wonderful people on top of that. And then just kind of see what they kind of come up with.
There's a strong density to this book.
Yeah.
I mean, there's pages that have 20, 30 panels.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
not 30, but there are definitely pages with a lot of panels on them.
Yeah.
Is this in the script? This density?
Yes. So one of the things that what I really wanted to do was I wanted to give you a feel of reading like a pulp novel, but as comics. So I wanted to feel sort of dense. So even from even from early on, I talked about it with Alex. The pandemic made it so. Usually, I like to send a physical book to one of my artists, just as a welcome present and all that kind of stuff. But the pandemic made postage, all that very, very tricky. But I I was looking at early Brubaker stuff where he was using 4 tiers a lot, and I liked the claustrophobia. And so I wanted the book to feel dense, and not just to give it a long read, but I wanted to, to do the comic book equivalent of oh, I'm reading an old Hammett novel or Chandler novel. Mm-hmm. And to me, that density was part of it. And when you're working with that kind of density, it's a little bit tricky, because one of the things I found anyway is that you actually, when you're working with that kind of density, you actually put less words on the page, because the paneling eats up a certain amount of real estate.
Sure.
So as a writer, I'm handcuffing myself to less, words and less copy. But I think it's worth it, because you're getting more of a sense of it. I think it makes it feel. It simultaneously, I feel makes it feel more cinematic, but at the same time, it makes you feel like the only way I can describe it is just it feels like if you go through a page of story at the same density you go through a page of prose. And that's really, with my last book, Infidel, the point there, or the challenge there, was how do I make a horror movie? How do I give you the feel of a horror movie but use the comic book medium?
Right.
And I like that experience so much. It's okay, so the next challenge is how do I make it feel like you're reading one of those old pulp novels, but have the experience be undeniably comics. And so that was part of the goal of the density of the book.
So I'm curious, when you are writing out a script with 16, 18 panels, do you try to thumbnail it yourself to see if it's even possible?
I do. A lot of times I do, do like little like boxes and all that sort of stuff to see it's possible. Sometimes a lot of the ones with like the 16, 18 sort of panel stuff, a lot of times that comes from me doing something like 8 or 9 panels and me saying to Alex, feel free to add beats if you like. So I think the stuff where it goes that crazy is usually Alex adding sort of new beats. But there's some that don't. Like, I've definitely scripted a couple 16 panel pages on there. And usually if I'm doing that as I had the page in mind as sort of a unit of design that I'm going through. And so a lot of times it's, if I'm doing anything with that kind of density, I always want, hopefully, if I'm not screwing it up, the density is meant to add to the reading experience. I'm never, hopefully, when the process is working, I'm never putting 16 panels on a page because I need to fit all that information on there.
Yeah.
It's more 16 panels on the page. I want a very specific effect to happen on that page, and all those panels add to that effect, and that's kind of how I try to look at it.
Yeah, and Alex, on your side, when you get a script that says, "Hey, there's 16 panels on this page," do you go, "Oh"?
Yeah. I say no problem because I'm used to that working with 10 panels in graphic novels. And when I receive a script and PORNSAK is apologizing because there's a lot of panel, I always say there is not a problem. It's justified. We wanted the readers to get this feel for when he reads the book, so no problem. And yeah, even though in my previous book, I always, not always, but often used a lot of panels when I storyboarded, because I also like to depict micro gestures to have the big picture of an action or an emotion. So yeah, it was not something new and not something that I feared.
Very good. No, that's good. How much do you think about? And we'll start with Alex on this one. How much do you think about the page turn and how the eye has to flow through the page, particularly when you're talking about pages with incredible density of 16, 18, 20 pages panels?
Yeah, I start thinking about the flow at the storyboard stage. Early on, I'm not changing much. I'm not changing at all anything when I ink. So I'm trying to depending on the emotion, I'm trying to use the right shot, the right angle, the right amount of panels. Sometimes it depends of how I feel about the sequence, but sometimes I add something. And I never subtract anything, but sometimes I feel that I could add something in a panel or 2 or 3, maybe. And mostly in the action sequences. So I don't, I'm not holding back because of the panels. And I'm trying to keep everything flowing with actions, motion, and emotion.
Yeah. Well, I think you do a terrific job of that. Let me ask you, PORNSAK, the same question about thinking of the page turns, of the flow.
Yeah, I'm always, I page turns are things I sort of obsess over. So I always like to know sort of where my page turns are and like try to sort of figure out like what will sort of get the big impact. And so I'm thinking about page turns when I'm outlining the comic of where sort of beats go, because I want to make sure those big shocking beats always sort of happen at a page turn. And in terms of how I sort of structure the page, I try to look at it like I have this philosophy of, I try to figure out, in my mind, there are 2 types of comic book pages when I'm writing them. There's a Garth Ennis page and a Jeff Lemire page. A Jeff Lemire page, to me, Lemire looks at the page as a unit of art. And it's about how that unit sort of communicates information. And so that's how, and how the design of that page communicates it. And so there are pages in the book that I look like, oh, this is a Lemire page. What can I do? And then because the book is what it is, how do I communicate that, but also have a certain density of information so it doesn't feel like, it's an unnecessary page. So there's that. But then there's also, in my mind, a Garth Ennis page. And to me, a Garth Ennis page is, I've completely forgotten. I completely don't pay attention to how many panels are on a page or what the design is. It's all about the scene work. It's all about two people in a room or whatever the scene is. And in a certain sense, the panel work is invisible. You just feel you've leaned in and you're sort of in that scene.
Yeah.
And so I try whenever I'm possible to, like, in my mind, know which is a Lemire page, which is a Garth Ennis page. And if they're neither, then chances are that page is just there to connect the dots between two scenes. And then it's kind of like, all right, well, what can I do to make it a little bit more of one, a little bit more of the other? So in that way, you're always getting some kind of impact from the page.
So you're consciously trying to set up that dichotomy?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's never like it's never a whatchamacallit, it's never a formula of like, oh, this needs a certain number of Ennis pages, a certain number of Lemire pages. But it's part of it's a little bit, I think, and I saw this as an editor as well. I think sometimes writers can fall into the traps of writing pages just to get, they're shoe leather pages. They're just to get you from point A to point B because you want to do this scene, you want to do that scene. And then you fall into the trap of like, oh, I have a 20-page comic and like 15 of my pages are shoe leather to get you from one point to another.
Right.
So part of the thing for me is just like, I want to decrease this, take down the shoe leather as much as humanly possible. So if this scene only exists to get me from point A to point B, well, is there anything I can add? Is there a design element I can add? Is there a dramatic component I can add to make it so that you have an experience on that page? So it's not just about getting you from point A to point B. And that's the kind of the process I try to do with sort of all my work, is just try to, get that across.
Yeah. It's interesting using shoe leather too, particularly for a detective book, which it is kind of shoe leather. It has to be.
Yeah. And that's part of the tricks with The Good Asian is that, you find out very quickly when you're trying to do a book like these gumshoe noirs that comics is not the best medium for it. The best medium for that really is prose, because it's all someone telling you what they saw or two people talking. And you realize quickly when you're doing that, like, oh, noir is just basically two people talking a lot, or just one person like looking around and like thinking a bunch of things. So it's kind of like, well, what can I do to make that visually interesting? And you realize really quickly, like, oh, that's one of the reasons why if you look at the lists of noir, it's like Bendis, Frank Miller, Darwin Cook, all these great cartoonists, because you really need to interact with the forum to kind of make that stuff come alive on the comics page. And so for me, like, I'm thinking about that a lot in terms of like, if we aren't playing with form, we aren't doing that sort of stuff, it really just is like two people talking in rooms, or one guy, like, you can do that whole book with just like two people talking in a room and one guy standing there just thinking things, and no one wants to read that comic. So part of it, and again, like, there's a wonderful history of, going from Steranko and all that sort of stuff, of people who found ways of cracking that code. And what they do is they just really sort of find different ways to sort of play with the form. And as a result, it becomes sort of a great place. It's just like, that's why working with someone like Alex is so great, because like he can kind of take what you throw at him and add new things to them, and really try to figure out like, all right, how do we make this work as a sort of a comics page?
I'm fascinated by your love of the page turn, only because your training was largely on books with advertisements. Where you never knew where the pages were ever.
And that's part of the reason why, like, I'm so obsessed with them now, because we had no control over them then. So now, like, I look at an image book, when I compare image books to like, Marvel and DC Comics, but even some like of the other publishers, like, to me, it's the difference between like HBO and network television, in the sense of, in an image book, it doesn't have to be like, our books are like 22 pages an issue, and that's even for the lighter side. The first 4 issues, like, we're going all crazy with page count. But it's kind of in the same way, like in network television, like a show has to be 41 minutes, and if you go over 1 minute, then you got to pay it back the next episode and all that kind of stuff. Image lets us, like, we have a 32-page signature. It's a self-cover, so 4 of those pages. So we have 28 pages that we can kind of do with whatever we want. So we can go up in story, we can go down in story, and it gives us that sort of extra sort of latitude. So for me, working on the comic, I'm enjoying all the extra freedom that comes with it. It enjoys me. I don't have to deal with ads. I know exactly where my page turns are. The story can go a little bit over if I need it to. It can be a little bit shorter if I need it to. So it's just me playing with everything I have access to.
It's interesting because that's certainly not Alex's experience.
No.
He was doing graphic novels for European publishers, and then everything that he's published has been for Image, which lets you do what you want. Do you ever feel the constraint of the format, Alex?
No, I never felt any constraint at all for comics because first I had great scripts, so the page is already designed to make my life easier, and then the way I storyboard and design the page are I think not simpler, but mo more direct in comics than in Europe.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in this book, and there's still more issues to come. He's drawing number 8. You must have finished the whole thing by now. Are there places that either of you feel like, wow, I wish I had 8 more pages, or I wish I had another issue. I couldn't do this idea.
Not for me anyway. We talked about how like 10 issues is such a weird length sort of for a book, and part of my brazen folly is I really let this story take up the space that sort of needs to, down to the point of, we originally were this was originally a 9 issue sort of run, and it was around when we hit issue 8 actually, where Will was just like, I think you should spend more time talking about this, and so we expanded an issue, and fortunately sales were doing well that it could justify that. But for this part of, there's always stuff that like tricks I wish we'd done, things I wish we had done, but that sort of stuff like, oh well, if we do another book, I can use that sort of for another book. But in terms of like telling this particular story, one of the things that I kind of told myself when I was writing it, and it's a decision that has stressed me out every day sort of since then, but I kind of told myself that like this book doesn't exist. Like it didn't, like I'm writing this book because it didn't exist. And so I don't want to be the reason why other books like this don't exist. So talk about what we want to talk about, but also too, if I go right up to the edge about talking about something and don't because of all these constraints, then chances are there'll be even less reason for someone else to come around and because I've already done it.
Yeah.
So part of the reason why the book is what the book is just say, don't regret having the moment to talk about this sort of stuff. So as a result, everything, the canvas that the book, covers, I don't have any regrets of places we don't go. I might have regrets of like, oh, I could have been a better writer and like done these things like a lot better, and I could have done this aspect a lot better. Or oh, here's some cool tricks I wish we had done here, and there's definitely a couple of those. And those I just kind of save. Hopefully, if we are lucky enough to have another volume, they'll be there for the next one. But in terms of this particular story, there's no piece of it that I sort of says, I wish we had talked more about that. That said, too, I also sort of feel like part of the way how I like to write is that old Hemingway quote of stories are like icebergs. For every base of it you see, there's 7 times more of it underneath the water.
Sure.
And so even with that in mind, there are bits where I allude to things that are bigger, but I like having certain things be allusions as opposed to not showing the whole piece of it.
Sure.
But there's no topics where it's just like, oh, I wish we had gotten into that.
Yeah. Alex, do you feel like you hit all the themes that you wanted to see hit? Do you feel like it, adequately did the things you wanted to do in terms of identity and things like that?
I think on the story points, I'm grateful for what we did on this book. Of course, for me, on some level, now with the time and experience, maybe today visually I would have been more graphic, more designed on some visuals, maybe in the inking process. But you create a book and you evolve with the book. So I'm trying to be okay with that and to go forward. Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't think you have anything to be ashamed of in terms of your design, my friend. I got to tell you. PORNSAK, you alluded to it a second ago that there may be more that
I would love to. So if it hasn't come through in the course of this interview, I'm a very neurotic person and I've moved very carefully. So I need to make sure that all the book sales and all the issue sales are healthy and can sustain, and not only can sustain another volume, but like what level it can sustain another volume. Can it sustain another 10 issues? Can it sustain another 6, another 4, another 1? So I'm looking at that data sort of all the way through. And then once I feel comfortable that I have enough data, I mean, one of the things I used to see a lot at Vertigo is things launch very strong, and then by the time you get to the end, like, they're mere fraction and shadow of what they were. So I like to have sort of all that data in mind, and then I'll be kind of like, I definitely have more stories to tell. I would definitely love to tell more stories. A lot of it's going to come down to how sales are, how healthy sales are, and all the different sort of forms that the book is published in. And then it's about me. It's like, okay, can I do another volume? And then it's like, all right, if I can't do another, what does that volume actually look like? And I'll know about that. There'll probably be, if there is a second volume, there will probably be a gap between volumes 1 and 2, primarily because I want to look at all the sales data coming in to sort of see like what it can actually sort of sustain.
Sure. And Alex, are you interested in doing another volume of this, or is there something else you want to start working on next? Nope.
Oh, there we go.
There he is.
Yeah. Of course, it would be lovely to have the story continuing and the audience to read what we would create. So I'm on issue 8. There's 2 issues left. So I mean. It's not the end, but it's almost there. So I'm trying to be focused on what I'm doing right now, and have all the thinking process about the future at the end. But yeah, it would be great to continue for a while.
Yeah, very good. Okay, technical question I'm going to ask you, PORNSAK. 10-issue miniseries, 4 issues in book 1. What?
Yeah, I know.
What?
So here was the thing. Originally, we were going to do sort of one trade for the whole thing, and it was written sort of with that in mind. And we weren't expecting it to have the real life resonance that it did. And then it became a matter of, we wanted to get more stuff talking about this sooner. We didn't want to wait until like 2022 to talk about this in the bookstore market. And so then it was just like, okay, we didn't really plan it to be 2 volumes. Where's the right sort of stopping point? And as tantalizing as I've been told the end of issue 4 is, they just get worse with every subsequent issue. So it felt particularly cruel to end at issue 5 because my symmetrical brain wants to go 1, 5, 6, and 10. But and issue 5 is out, so people have read it. It's a particularly cruel cliffhanger to have people wait like 6 months for. So we felt this one was a little bit sort of kinder. But I totally get what you mean, because I definitely feel it.
It's always something to ask. Oh, we have another question. Jordan is waving me. Cool. Bring it on. Rodrigo, hey, there you are, buddy. In the last issue of The Good Asian, you posed a challenge regarding the inspiration for that issue. Has anyone guessed what issue from a different series inspired it?
No, they haven't yet. So I feel like I shouldn't mention it. I want to give like as wide a berth as possible to give people a chance to. I actually thought it was pretty obvious, but I guess it's not. So, so I want to give people a chance.
Then his last part of that question was, any hints?
Oh, interesting.
Without giving it away.
I know. What's a good hint? It's from a writer that it's a book by one of my favorite writers, and I have mentioned him in many interviews, possibly even this one, but possibly not. But yeah, that's okay. That's my hint.
All right. So now, Rodrigo, you've got to go with that.
Okay.
And, get it. Okay. Is there anything else you guys would like to plug?
Because Fabio called in, which I thought was really cool. Everyone should, if they haven't picked up Day Tripper, which I also worked on. Me and Fabio and Gabriel worked on Day Tripper. One in Eisner is absolutely amazing. That said, and I told him this, I am so jealous at how good Two Brothers is. Book is so good, and I'm frustrated that they worked on a better book without me. because that book is so good. But because Fabio and Gabriel, at least Fabio, I don't know, maybe Gabriel's asleep, he could care less. But Fabio at least took the time to like call him, which is actually super cool. And he's probably like since turned off now. He's had his moment in the sun, and he's logged off. But people should totally, if they haven't read Day Tripper, I mean, they should just read Day Tripper. It's like an amazing sort of book in general. But also Two Brothers. Those are two great graphic novels.
Yeah, we actually Day Tripper was our 5th or 6th graphic novel of the month club book.
Oh, cool.
So if someone were to order it from our website, you would actually get it with a signed
cool.
a signed book plate by both of the Moon brothers.
Nice. It's one of my. I like to keep a mementos of original art of every book I work on. And that's like my white whale, because they won't part with any of the art from that book, because it's so like personal to them. Yeah. And they'll be like, maybe we'll give you promotional material, and they still haven't given me that. Yeah. So like, but yeah, I love that book so much.
Yeah. The amazing thing about Day Tripper too is that it's still in print from Vertigo.
Yeah, it's
like the last not company owned book.
It's an enormous seller for them. It's funny because that was one of those books that we felt very grateful that we were able to like stay level at like 9,000 copies of the comic, and it is a perennial seller for them. I'm so happy.
Yep.
So happy.
Yep. I also am. And then just sort of a reminder for everybody at home, if you want a copy of Good Asian, it also comes with a signed exclusive book. I can't quite get it that close. So if you buy it from us, it comes with something cool that's extra and free. Isn't that nice? Good plug. Alex, is there anything that you're working on Good Asian? I don't know if you have anything else after this that you know what's up.
Yes, I'm working on the Good Asian full time, and so far I'm 100% on it. I just wanted to add, because we talked earlier about the flow of the page, I wanted to add that Lou Ridge and Jeff Powell, they really do an amazing job on the book. And each time I see the finished product, I'm always amazed by what they add to the process and to the book overall. So yeah, I want to say that they're great.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that.
Lee and Jeff are so good. Like, Lee's such a consummate professional. If you want changes, he'll get them to you sort of like within the hour. He's amazing. I actually think he's doing his best work since, I think this and like his work on Deadly Class ties at some of the best work he's done in his like 20 years in comics. I'm so happy and proud to be working with him. Jeff Powell consistently just like amazes me of just like, he has this great way of like being experimental that you don't really notice that it's being experimental. You don't notice he's pushing things because it's so like tied into the storytelling. Yeah. So it's so good. So they're also both like really great guys. So like, so happy to work with them. And also I realized I should probably self-plug something. So because that's what you do in these things. But because it's Halloween, my last book, Infidel, which I mentioned a couple times. If you haven't checked that out, check that out. Working with Aaron Campbell, who would go on to Bigger and Brighter and working on Hellblazer, and then the legendary Jose Villarrubia, and again also with Jeff Powell.
Yeah, very good, very good. And I also especially want to call out Lee for the color work on this. Yeah. It really is a beautiful, sort of desaturated in the way, like it doesn't look like other comics. It looks like something from the period.
Yeah. It's this great trick that he does where he'll do like these super saturated stuff, but you feel like you're watching an old like black and white movie. Yep. Like it's so great.
Yeah, it's a neat trick.
Also too, because I haven't had a chance to say it, we have Dave Johnson covers, which is like such like a big deal for me because I'm such a huge fan.
Yep.
I just had dinner with him, and it blows my mind that like I can call him a friend because he's like, I've been a fan of his for so long.
Yeah, well, and all your B covers are fantastic as well. So no, they've all been. This is a quality book.
Thank you, sir.
We like this book a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So the last question. We have a lot of people who watch this series who want to make their own comics. A lot of times they don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. I would love both of you to kind of give some. What's your best point of suggestion, of recommendation? It can be a physical thing. It can be sort of a philosophical thing. It can be an emotional thing. But someone who wants to make comics, Alex, what would you say to them?
For me, in my opinion, I would say don't be afraid to travel and to go meet people, and having your portfolio ready and on point is for me the best advice I could give, because you could have your Olympic moment. If you're not ready to seize it, Yeah, it's you might miss it. So having your portfolio, going to on travels and meeting people.
Beautiful. I love that. I don't think we've ever heard that answer either.
That's
So that's a really, really good answer.
That's awesome. I guess mine is, and I think if you're an artist, like I'm so jealous because like it's so much easier to make comics as an artist. You can just, I did an event with Gene Yang, and Gene was just like, you draw something, you Xerox it, and you ask stores to put it up, and you're now making comics, and that I'm so jealous of that. If you're a writer, it's a lot trickier. And the one, because I get asked a lot, like, I want to make a comic, how do I make a comic? And the thing I always sort of tell people is like, I don't actually know how to make one comic. I know the road to become a comic book professional, and that is be part of the community, be a champion of artists, even when it's not learn how to celebrate and champion good art anytime you sort of see it. And if you do that, you will eventually become part of a comic book making community. And that is how you become a comic book creator at the end of the day. Before I was a Vertigo editor, I worked part-time at a comic book shop, and there are very many similar stories about that. But the more I talk to people and how they start their comic book careers, you realize, especially for writers, so few of them start in isolation. Cartoonists can do that. So few comic book writers start in isolation. They start by finding their comic book community, whether it's at a formal place like Marvel and DC, or just going to cons and finding other people who are like them and share tips and tricks on like where they find their artists and all that kind of stuff. And that's sort of the best way to do it, is just find the people. Every comic book creator has that class of creators they came up with that they meet at shows and all that sort of stuff. And that's how you kind of become a comic book writer is just with that group. It's part of what makes the experience so great. It is, it is an experience that like you don't just do one and leave. You kind of stick around for a while. Yeah. So, but that's kind of the only way I know how to do it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think that's a great answer. I wanna thank both of you for taking the time being here today, talking with us about the book. I want to thank you for the book though, especially. It's smart. It's intelligent. Smart and intelligent are the same thing, aren't they? But it's got a lot of really deep themes. It's got a lot of history. It teaches you things. And it's just a great cracking piece of pulp. So, hells yeah! If you're sitting at home and you don't know what to read, you're like, I'm at loose ends. I want to read something. The Good Asian. This is a thing for you to read for sure. We recommend this highly. So thank you, and thank you, Alex, for coming in and doing this.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. A little bit of business. I want to thank. Actually, you know who I want to thank, especially this time, is everybody who came in for the studio audience. Thank you very much. It's a horribly rainy day here in San Francisco. It hasn't rained in like a year, and all of a sudden, these people came out in the rain. And so I really thank everybody. We're not doing this immediately anytime soon, but at least we know it works even with the rain. And I want to thank my staff for making it so that I can, with my broken arm, exist. So Zoe and Kat, you guys are awesome. I want to thank Jordan for running the show. We wouldn't have it without Jordan. And again, I want to thank PORNSAK and Alex for making comics, because I literally would have nothing to do with my life if these guys weren't making comics. So there's that. Okay. Hey, and then Future Club stuff, just FYI, next month's Graphic Novel of the Month Club is also an image book. Nice. It just happens to work out. Time Before Time. Fantastic piece of science fiction. You're going to love this. So that's going to be a great interview. And then our classic Graphic Novel of the Month Club is Pedro and Me by Judd Winnick. And Judd's going to come and talk about being on MTV's Real World and talk about Pedro, and it's going to be fun. And then we're going to talk about making kids comics too, but we'll be able to swear because it won't be the kids show. I like Judd. Judd's a great guy. And then the kids book this month is Rassel Castle. So we've got Paul Tobin and Colleen Coover who are going to be talking to us about making this fun piece of funness. That's what I got for you. I will see you all next time that we do this, and come back soon. Join the club, will you? Because that's how we get to do this. Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of the Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were watching, please subscribe and hit that bell up in the top corner. If you enjoyed the books that we're talking about and the creators that we're talking to, every month we pick a brand new book. The staff votes on it. It's a program that helps keep our store alive, and we'd love to have you as a member. You'll get a new book every month. Just follow that URL at the bottom of the screen.